Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. I'm Eric Hansen from OTT.X. On behalf of all of us at OTT.X, I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Over the course of the year, we've enjoyed many valuable presentations from thought leaders across our industry, and this week is no exception. Joining us today are two executives from Deluxe, Chris Reynolds and Greg Tayeb. Chris has over 20 years of media and entertainment experience in post-production, localization, operations, personnel management, process, and product development. In his current role, Chris oversees Deluxe's worldwide localization and media services team, responsible for localizing and delivering content to the world's largest digital platforms, channels, and theaters in over 80 languages. Greg has been solving challenges in the M&E industry for 20 years, working in product post-production, mastering, and localization. His career started on sets, but his technical interests moved him into post-production. Eventually, his passion for language and transcreation, not sure what that is, interested in finding out, led him into dubbing, where he worked in multiple capacities on behalf of every major content owner at the time. Today, Greg oversees product management for the localization group at Deluxe. In their talk today, entitled Remote Controls, they're going to cover some of the challenges and opportunities to leverage cloud-based audio recording systems for recording ADR and localized audio in the post-production process. Before we get started, I want to also thank Deluxe for participating today in our series. They've been very active in OTT.X, participating in our conferences, discussion groups, and working sessions. So thank you, Deluxe. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Reynolds and Greg Tayeb from Deluxe. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, you, Eric. We're very happy to be here today with everybody and appreciate this opportunity. Why don't we go ahead and define transcreation while I pull up the slides, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, whereas translation might be considered a conversion from one language to another, transcreation is taking the original intent and the concept of the intent of the original language and transcreating it into another language. So, you know, whereas a translation might be an exact translation of words, if the intent differs from one territory to another, you might have to transcreate to get a reasonable and high quality product for people in that territory. You know, example I'd like to say, there's a few examples I could think of, but one is, you know, maybe in the US we might say something insulting to somebody with open arms and a smile, and that's a sign that we're actually friends and that, you know, we're joking around. Whereas in maybe Russia, even if we're friends and joking around, we wouldn't insult each other because that would be a problem. So a transcreation would be, you know, maybe not an insult in that case.
Yeah. Awesome. It is a word that in localization we're familiar with, but other people aren't as much. So thank you for that explanation. One question down. Hopefully we get a lot more later. So again, thanks for being here. We're here to talk about remote controls in the context of cloud-based dubbing and ADR. So we want to give a little background as we get into this topic and talk about why remote control is so important to cloud-based audio recording. So to start, for a little background for anyone who's unfamiliar with what we're doing in the cloud space with web applications, at Deluxe, we have a global localization platform that's living in AWS and that we're managing a ton of volume on. So as part of the platform, we have integrated web applications so that no users have to perform work locally on their machine. Everything's through their browser. The tools that they use to perform their tasks are integrated. And we have something like 20 plus variations of our web applications. And One Dub and its cloud-based audio recording is just one of those. So on our platform, for a sense of scale, we have upwards of 1,000 internal Deluxe users, and then we have a global distributed workforce of over 6,000 people. And we're managing all of our script creation, audio description, subtitling, and now aspects of dubbing on the platform. So, I mean, when we talk about how much volume and how many jobs are going on the platform every day, it's pretty astounding. I was talking to Greg before this, and last month, for example, we ended up delivering over 20,000 unique subtitle files to our customers, which represented close to 1 million minutes of content that we subtitled. And in order to output those 20,000 files, Greg, I mean, how many tasks, unique tasks are we talking about?
There could be, I would say on average 3 to 4 tasks per file. So, that's 3 to 4 people logging in and doing work in the system for each file delivered. So, we could say 60 to 80,000 tasks worked on in a month. And it's important. The volume is obviously a big factor to show scalability, but I think that in terms of audio, this is our first foray into recording audio remotely and distributed workforce. But with subtitling, our operation has been entirely remote for the last 3-4 years. So we have a really strong track record in remote workflows, and now we're bringing that to audio recording as well, which is really exciting and brings up a lot of different challenges that we'll talk about a little further down the line.
No, absolutely. And fully remote, I mean, we've had a distributed workforce for over 15 years, but all in the cloud with no desktop software is, the last 3 to 4. So, so Greg and I both have a strong background in audio. We're both musicians. I actually started in music before getting into post-production and media and entertainment. We've spent a lot of time in studios. And so to set up the challenges here, we wanted to talk a bit about how things have been done historically. And even today, like the primary means of recording ADR, and for those of you unfamiliar with ADR, that's automated dialogue replacement. That is the re-recording of lines of dialogue for post-production when there are challenges on set with noise, or there's a performance issue, or there's an added line. So this is a very common practice where actors come into the studio after the video editing has been done, after the initial dialogue editing happens, and there are issues or reasons creatively why they decide that they need to revoice or re-record. Similarly, in animation, you start with recording. So that's fully recorded in a studio. And that's really the big challenge that we need to overcome, is that traditionally, whether it's ADR, it's original animation, or it's dubbing, where you've translated the script and now you're recording voice actors in other languages, it's done in a controlled professional environment. It's a professional recording studio, sound-treated rooms, the microphones, the equipment, everything is controlled by an experienced audio engineer. And the directors and actors come in and they can focus completely on performance. They don't have to worry about any of the technical variables. The other benefit is that everyone's together. So communication's instant and personal. It might be hard to see in this picture, but you have the engineer in a booth, and through the window, you've got another person sitting at a desk, which would be in the same room as the actor. And that's the director, giving guidance to that actor to give them inputs on their performance. And again, the voice talent and director don't have to worry about any technical details. So there has been a need to record people in different locations for a long time, of course. And going back to what's called ISDN, where it's using analog phone lines to connect sound between studios, there's been a way to do that. And going beyond ISDN to digital and cloud-based tools, there are still point-to-point ways for studios to record and collaborate together. But Greg, why don't you talk through some of the challenges with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the bigger challenges are that, in the past remote recording, you'd still be in a recording studio. So, you'd have an audio engineer in say Los Angeles, and maybe an actor in New York who needs to be recorded, that actor would still need to go into a studio. They'd still need to be set up by a professional engineer, and the two engineers would work together in the remote recording session using ISDN or things like Source Connect, where you still have two Pro Tools sessions open, or digital audio workstation sessions open. So you really need engineers and the technical expertise on both sides, and that both studios would be in a sound controlled environment. There'd be a professionally sound treated rooms. But some of the other challenges were that there was sync only and no control. So basically, if I'm in Los Angeles and I'm the person who needs the audio, I'd be able to get the feed of audio from New York, but I wouldn't be able to arm the tracks or hit record. So there'd be communication between me and the engineer on the other side of the country.
Right.
So a little cumbersome workflow and tight communication needed.
Right. So the bottom line, you have to have strong technical expertise on both sides. Both sides are in a controlled environment and using professional digital audio workstations, which represents an investment. And then on top of that, there's the compressed streams and file management. So in order to control latency and quality across transports, these are live streams that are compressed. So it's not 24-bit, 48 kilohertz audio. And there are ways to get around that, but it involves having to deal with some file management after your session is complete. And so really though, today, we don't have that option all the time, right? We don't have two controlled environments. We have people working everywhere, even pre-pandemic, right? You've got voice actors traveling all over the world. They might be on set, they might be on vacation. There's a pickup line needed here and there. So there's constant logistical challenges. And even to record remotely, there's always this scramble of, is there a studio nearby? Is there a place I can go? And then you've got to get those studios to connect to make sure they have the same technology and equipment capabilities in order to facilitate that. So we wanted to create a tool that allowed people to record remotely and simplifies that process so that we can overcome some of the challenges.
That's right. I was going to add, and it's on this slide as well, but security is another, as you're scrambling to find these small studios or studios around the world that these actors can go into record, in the past, you'd have to send them unreleased content, unreleased video files of your titles. And that's a high security risk, especially for a studio that might not have been audited by a content owner.
Exactly. And it's created an incredible burden on auditing teams around the world, where you really have to find a place that is approved and acceptable. Then you have to create watermarked files, get them to them. You're sending them scripts as well. So there's a lot of sensitivity there on materials. And I think, we figured out how to get through those processes, but it also introduces delays in time. So even when it is, when we're talking about approved facilities, it just takes time. You have to generate additional files and make sure all of those controls are in place. But if we want to get away from the studios and facilitate people being able to record anywhere, we can still do studio to studio on our tool, but we might have voice actors and directors at home. And that's the commonplace. And in the COVID pandemic became an absolute necessity to get things done. And so that places a challenge around the talent setup and the environment they're in. They have varied levels of technical savviness. They have to have a computer. They have different environments. The sound quality can vary dramatically. It might be a fully concrete room with a bunch of reflections. And they have different equipment. So what we found is that the most successful way to get around that is to continue to work with studios. We think it's critical that you maintain the collaboration and that the sound engineer still has a part in this and actually controls the experience, which we'll demonstrate. but they also have to work with the talent to make sure that they have the right equipment. Either the talent already has some of it or they can supply it to them, and that they'll work through the recording environment and coach them on things that they can do to improve that. I see, Greg, you have an example of one of the products on the market behind you there that somebody could get. It's a shield that goes around the microphone to control reflections, so it's got dampening. And we've seen other things people are doing where they're actually sending out full tents with sound treatment. But you can also do simple things like hanging blankets, using a closet instead of a big open room. And so really for every person, if it's their first time doing it, you're gonna have to go through those discussions. You're gonna have to validate that they have a microphone, that they have a computer that's capable, and that they have an environment that they can record in. But the other important thing is security, like Greg mentioned. So now we've got people outside of studios. So we don't have the option of, is this an audited facility? And we're not going to be able to send people out to every home around the world and make sure that, you know, they have controls, and they're not going to have segmented networks and protected storage and all of the other things that are needed for pre-release material. And then there's the session cadence, right? When we described the other technologies, there's a lot of things that you'd have to go through. You'd have to have the right software. You have to talk them through installation, and things that might be simple to more technically savvy people, it can really just cause a complete blocker with certain people. So it needs to be very simple. And we wanted to remove software installation completely. And then it's also what you have to do after that. If you can't see and control and validate exactly what's happening, then there's going to be a lot more editing after you're done. So it just adds time in the process. So our goal was bring professional frame accurate audio recording directly into the web browser. We wanted to be able to maintain 24-bit, 48 kilohertz quality. We want to be sure that we can work on pre-release content with all the security features available through our cloud platform. And we wanted to be sure that we can maintain collaboration. All of the roles of the participants in a traditional session are critical to creating a high quality product. So we need the directors involved. We need the actors to be able to focus on performance. And you need the sound engineers and recordists to be there to make sure that things run smoothly and that the quality of the recording is sufficient for mixing and for the final deliverable. Obviously, we want to stay on time. We want to minimize some of the hurdles on setup. So we wanted to remove software installation completely and make it as easy as plugging in a USB microphone into your computer. And we wanted to leverage all the experience that we have. On security, again, Greg, like, why don't you talk a bit more about the features for video playback and that make it a secure experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we actually might have a slide for that if you jump to the next slide.
There you go.
Look at that. So in terms of security, I think there are a lot of features that we have. First is that there is no downloading of video files. So this is actually something that's unprecedented in audio recording. You know, even up until a few months ago, for a dub or for ADR, it wasn't possible for post-production studios to be able to say, sure, I could record this audio without having to physically download a file onto my local network. So that's already a huge security jump right there. You know, we can pull files directly from an Aspera server or an S3 bucket into the platform without having to have anybody download them. From there, we take those files and we transcode them. And when I say we, it's an automated process that the system does that isn't actually accessible by any people. But we transcode the files, we color degrade them, we watermark them, we DRM the video files so that nobody should, even if somebody were to access the video file, they wouldn't be able to play it back. Now, once we've done this transcode, the original source file that we pulled to create our proxy is purged from the system. And from that point on, we're using the DRM proxy only. In addition to that, it's hard to see here, but username and IP address are overlaid onto pictures. So whoever you are, wherever you're logged in from, that information is always overlaid over the video streaming video. Jumping around here, there's also a session sync feature, which we'll demo, that kind of has a Google Sheets-like functionality that lets you see who else is in the session with you, which is really useful for a lot of reasons, but from a security standpoint, it lets you know that there's no other people in the session. And then we have full audit reports available on all the projects. So anybody who has done anything associated to the project in the system, you can see almost their every move in terms of when they accessed the projects, what they did with the projects, and what changes were made. And of course, we have multi-factor authentication, which is pretty standard. And our access level groups and permission assignments allow the right people to access content. And our system logout cadence is the same as our financial institution. So if you're not using the system for a few minutes, if you're idle, then it logs you out automatically. So there's a lot of security features. We go through at Deluxe a lot of security audits from different content owners. And we also do audits ourselves on a weekly basis, different scans and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So, and I think that's key, is that it's built onto a platform that is already working, like we said at the beginning, for tons of other workflows and users all around the world on pre-release content every day. So security is it's in our DNA. So now we'll go ahead and jump to a demo, but before that, we're going to pause and give an opportunity for questions and see if anybody has anything before we jump into the demo.
So for those that are attending, you can just use the Q&A icon on your Zoom console. Just drop questions in there. I guess you can also put them in chat for that as well. Super interesting, guys. I guess I hadn't really thought about ADR, but I guess there's a lot of cases where it's really hard. You can imagine if you're in an outdoor scene somewhere, or there's a lot of noise on the set just by nature of what's happening in the scene, you can't use that audio.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd say that ADR is used on 99% of films and television shows. I'd say it's very rare that a show doesn't have an ADR step in its.
Kind of takes some of the magic out of it, right? I mean, you imagine Batman is actually talking while Batman's, nope, that's a dude in the studio.
Well,
and, microphone.
And what's interesting too, is you think about it, I mean, actors generally do not like ADR, right? Because you think about, they get into character, they're in production. Yeah. And then production wraps, you go through post, all those things, and ADR is happening months later, sometimes more than a year later, depending on the editorial schedule. And now they have to come back in, get back into character. They can hear their original performance, and they have to record that in sync to picture, right? And so some actors are fantastic at it, and it just goes really quick. Some actors, it's quite challenging. And so I think on set these days, it's actually also impacted the way you deal with sound on set. The microphones and everything are really aimed at just capturing the performance, because you just want to avoid ADR. Every other sound in the environment can be recreated, and generally is, from background sounds of the cars to your movements. It's highly directional microphones just to try to get that performance to avoid ADR. But even with everything everyone does, like Greg said, 99% of all content has ADR. And there was a time, if you watch action movies, it would at times be 30% plus of the dialogue was ADR.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I mean, to the extent that we can use more VFX and just computer generated stuff around, you know, a dude in a studio.
Yeah.
we don't really need, you know, that's interesting. Yeah. I had a question about security. I know how sensitive studios are to the security of their content, especially when it's unreleased. And I guess I'm kind of wondering about the reception that you're receiving or have received to bring this out, and you know, the idea that this could actually work, and you can really rely on the security that you have. How studios kind of responded to that?
They're very receptive, and again, I think it's due to that pedigree and the history. We already have translators all over the world in region. So, you know, we're servicing over 80 languages, and that means people are all over the world working on pre-release content. So in addition to, you know, image degradation, visual and forensic watermarking and DRM and everything that Greg mentioned, if it's highly sensitive content, we also, either the studio or we, perform rotoscoping, where we'll block out large portions of the image. You might blur things. They might replace the visuals if it's a spoiler, just in case. You know, that happened recently. There was a product that came through, and it's a huge franchise, and they absolutely don't want people to know who a certain character is. So it's literally a different head that's superimposed, so you don't know the original actor for all of the foreign language dubbing. They don't want anyone to know who it is. So there's other things you can do, and you also don't have to expose the whole thing, right? You might have a specific video that's just the scenes or portions that need to be accessed. But in general, it's pretty commonplace. We're working on, you know, highest tier features and episodics, and there's a ton of control. And again, nobody can download, nobody has anything on their computers, and so that's a big relief.
It's all in the cloud.
This
isn't your cloud. This is like a commercially available cloud. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's on AWS, and it's backed by AWS's security.
Yeah.
And in terms of, you know, Chris just touched on the point of downloadable files. You know, I think that some studios' responses to this have been tremendous, because in a traditional workflow, you send those video files to a studio, they download them, they load them into their systems, and you record. And then the next day, those files are still on their systems. And the day after that, they're still on the systems. And a week later, they're still there, and a month later. And the project might not be releasing for 3 months after you've done this recording, or longer. And just the fact that these files might be existing in so many different places goes away. You know, with something like this, you offer the streaming video, you can rescind access once the job's done, and it results in a much more secure workflow. I think that it's also interesting to see. I think 5 years ago, studios were terrified of the cloud, because it was like, you know, well, once it's in the cloud, it can go anywhere. But the reality is that also means you can control where it is and when it is available. And
when there are concerns, the ability to provide that audit trail and investigation, it's so much faster when you're using.
I was at a conference a few years ago, and there was somebody from it was Google or Amazon or something, and they were, at that time, studios were still, you know, not really embracing the idea of using the cloud for production or post-production. And you know, he made the point that their platform, he was one of the security you know, executives. Their platform is defending against nation states on a day-by-day basis, and they will put, he's like, I will put my security up against anybody else's security that's sitting in between a few walls in Burbank. So, and you know, that was a really good point. They've got some very hardened security there. So I felt a lot better about putting the photos of my family up there.
Right. No, it's very true. I mean, we also have a service at Deluxe that a lot of content owners use, that is literally a special division that traces security breaches. So they're proactively monitoring for pre-release things. They're in the dark web even. And so we have a lot of experience as a company, not just from the tools we build, but even tracking down and investigating security incidents and breaches. And that feedback comes back to our product and development teams and is, you know, something we obviously incorporate that knowledge of where leaks come from into how we design our workflows and our technology. So yeah,
super cool. Y'all should do another webinar about that. That's cool.
Yeah.
We do have a question here. I'll read it to you. Do you manage agreements or contracts between independent dubbing studios, talent, and the production?
Yeah, and the answer is yes, we do. So we have our own studios where Deluxe owns the studio. So for example, in LA, Spain, France, we have our own studios where we manage all of the contracts between the talent and the content owners. But additionally, we offer large centralized dubbing project management. So we also work with a network of 350 plus recording studios around the world, dubbing studios. And for that, we'll get hired to manage, for example, all of the dubbing languages. So we might have 14 languages that we're managing. And so for all of those, we manage all of the contracts centrally for the customer. So we have contracts with the studios, and then there's different legal rules in different countries and jurisdictions. So we have a team dedicated to that.
Thanks very much for having us.
With that, we're going to close things off today for the webinar series. So I want to thank everybody for jumping on with us today. We did record the session, and as always, you can check it out through our website, OTT.X.org. Hope you also join us over the next few weeks for some upcoming events. We have another webinar next Wednesday. Sorry, it's in 2 weeks, on December 2nd. We're going to hear from Amdocs, a really cool sounding presentation entitled The Dawn of the Super Aggregate. So you can join us for that. I also want to remind everybody about the OTT.X Impact Awards and encourage you all to be a part of them by submitting content that is making a positive impact on the world. Finally, we're rapidly approaching our final conference of the year, the OTT.X at Pipeline, which is on December 9th and 10th. You can check out the slate of really, really great presentations and research and analysis that we're bringing to that event. You'll want to make sure to register for that and join us for that as well. So with that, we'll close everything off. And thanks again, everybody, for being a part of the session today.